The Greenway Motel, situated on the outskirts of the small town of Larkspur, was no stranger to forgotten items. Travelers, weary from long journeys, often left behind personal belongings. Once a year, the motel hosted a lost and found sale at 1122, where locals and tourists could purchase these forgotten treasures. This year's sale drew a sizable crowd, enticed by rumors of rare and unique items. Julia, a college student with a penchant for vintage fashion, was among them. She was immediately drawn to a beautiful silver locket and could hardly believe her luck when she purchased it for a mere $5. Her friend Leo wasn't as fortunate. He was intrigued by an old diary, its pages filled with the scrollings of a tormented soul chronicling days of sorrow and despair. Being an aspiring writer, he saw it as inspiration for his next story. The trouble began a few days later. Julia started having vivid, unsettling dreams in which she was trapped in a burning building, the flames inching closer every night. She'd wake up drenched in sweat, the smell of smoke lingering. Leo, on the other hand, grew increasingly withdrawn. He became obsessed with the diary, scribbling in it at all hours. The despair from its pages seemed to leach into his life, casting a gloomy pall over his every moment. Suspecting a connection to their recent acquisitions, Julia and Leo decided to investigate the history of their items, delving into local archives. They discovered a newspaper article from 1973 telling the harrowing tale of a tragic fire at a downtown Larkspur residence. The only victim was a young woman named Elisa Montgomery, whose portrait accompanying the article bore an uncanny resemblance to the picture inside Julia's locket. Digging further, they uncovered the tragic story of Samuel Thompson, a local poet who succumbed to severe depression. A copy of his diary was attached to his biography, identical to the one Leo possessed. Realizing they were reliving the tragic fates of Elisa and Samuel, the two sought out Mrs. Eileen Greenway, the elderly owner of the motel. She listened patiently to their stories, her face growing grave with each word. She finally spoke, her voice trembling. "For years, I tried to resist holding these sales, but the spirits grew restless. These items are cursed, anchoring the souls of their past owners to the mortal realm. Their stories are doomed to repeat until they find peace." Julia, desperate to end her nightmares, asked, "How do we break the curse?" Mrs. Greenway replied, "You must return the items to where their stories ended. Only there can the spirits find release." Without hesitation, Julia and Leo set out. They first visited the remnants of the burned residence, now overgrown with weeds. Julia placed the locket at the center of the charred foundation, and as she did, a gust of wind swelled around them. For a fleeting moment, Julia thought she saw Elisa's apparition smiling gratefully before dissipating. Next, they visited Samuel's gravesite, a lonely tombstone shadowed by a large oak tree. Leo placed the diary atop the grave, whispering an apology. The wind rustled again, and a silhouette of Samuel clutching a book appeared. He nodded at Leo, his figure slowly fading into the setting sun. The cursed items were returned, and the tormented souls set free. Julia's nightmares ceased, and Leo's gloom lifted. The Greenway Motel's lost and found. Sales came to an abrupt end. Mrs. Greenway, realizing the true cost of these events, transformed the annual sale into a memorial day, honoring the lost souls that once sought refuge at her establishment. As for Julia and Leo, their brush with the supernatural bonded them closer. They became local legends known as the ones who faced the shadows of the lost and emerged stronger. Their story became a testament to the enduring power of friendship and determination. Over there, the The cedar-shaped motel sat at the edge of a withering town, surrounded by tall pine trees that whispered secrets to the winds. Its sign, weather-beaten and rusted, promised clean rooms and free cable. But for visitors, the motel's most distinguishing feature was in the old neon sign. Upon entering any of the Cedar Shades rooms, occupants were greeted by a large, intricate painting hung directly across the bed. Each artwork was magnificent, capturing landscapes, still lives, and scenes so vividly that they seemed alive. However, as many guests would come to find out, these were no ordinary paintings. Lana and Ross, a couple on a cross-country road trip, decided to break the journey for the night. At the Cedar Shade Motel, Lana was instantly drawn to the painting in their room, showcasing a moonlit beach with crashing waves, a bonfire, and a couple dancing near the flames. It was eerily reminiscent of their plans to visit the nearby beach that night. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Ross remarked, seeing Lana's fascination. "Looks almost like us." They laughed it off, attributing the similarity to coincidence. However, when they arrived at the beach later, Lana felt an eerie sense of déjà vu. The setting, the bonfire, even the couple from the painting seemed to eerily coincide with the scene before them. As the night went on, the painting's influence grew more pronounced. At one point, a gust of wind blew Lana's hat away, and Ross chased after it, reenacting the exact joyful chase portrayed in the artwork. "Do you ever feel like we're following a script?" Lana whispered to Ross as they danced by the fire, the waves providing a rhythmic backdrop. Ross chuckled. "What, like the painting is controlling us? That's just silly, Lana." Yet, as they returned to their room, another detail from the painting manifested. Lana found a seashell necklace on their bed, identical to the one that the painted woman wore. "This is getting creepy," she muttered. Ross, trying to keep the atmosphere light, just smiled. "Maybe the artist is psychic. Let's get some sleep." The next morning, guests from other rooms began to gather in the motel's small lobby, comparing their own experiences with the paintings. Each artwork seemed to predict events from the occupants' stays, from innocent activities to personal conflicts. "It's like these paintings know us," murmured one elderly man. His room's artwork had depicted him reuniting with his estranged son, which shockingly had happened just hours ago. The young woman added, "Mine showed a lost kitten, and guess what I found outside my door this morning?" But among the shared stories, a chilling pattern emerged. Every painting had one final scene that hadn't yet occurred, one that always depicted the subject's demise. Lana and Ross's beach painting showed the couple's silhouettes being swallowed by towering waves. The elderly man showed him lying still on the floor, a spilled medication bottle beside him. The young woman's painting displayed a shadowy figure standing behind her as she looked into a mirror. Panic began to grip the occupants, desperate to break the curse of the painted prophecies. They sought out the motel owner, an old woman named Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins, hearing their tales, sighed deeply. "I tried to warn everyone about the paintings, but no one ever listens. They were created by an artist who stayed here long ago. He claimed to see the future and poured his visions onto canvases. Some say he struck a deal with the devil to gain his talents, while others believe he was just cursed." Lana, desperate, pleaded, "How can we break free from their predictions?" Mrs. Higgins responded slowly, "The paintings can only guide fate, not determine it. If you are truly intent on changing your destiny, you must change the story of the painting." The guests scattered, each determined to change their ending. The elderly man threw away his medication, choosing a different path to health. The young woman kept every light on and never looked into a mirror. For Lana and Ross, they knew returning to the beach was out of the question. Instead, they spent a night away from water, surrounded by the safety of the motel's walls. As dawn broke, the guests reconvened, realizing that they had successfully altered the course of their painted fates. The paintings, though still eerily accurate about past events, no longer had power over their futures. From that day, the Cedar Shade's reputation grew, no longer just a stopover motel, but a place of prophecy and fate. Some came seeking their painted futures, while others sought to rewrite them. But one thing was for sure, no one ever looked at art the same way after a night at the Cedar Shade Motel. The Grayson Motel had long been the subject of whispered conversations in the nearby town of Hartsville. A classic two-story inn, it boasted 8 comfortably furnished rooms and a reputation for old-world charm. However, even the most nostalgic residents never mentioned the motel's 9th room. Sarah and Mark, an urban couple seeking a quiet weekend getaway, had no inkling of the stories that swirled around the Grayson when they booked their stay. They were more interested in the hiking trails and quaint cafes the town promised. However, their attention shifted dramatically on their first night. When Sarah's phone buzzed with a new voicemail notification, the caller ID read Room 9. Playing the message, a voice distorted with desperation and terror pleaded, "Please, you have to help me. I'm trapped in room 9. It's so dark in here. You have to get me out." The couple exchanged uneasy glances. The message was undoubtedly unsettling, but perhaps it was a prank by some mischievous kids in town. To quell their unease, Mark decided to inquire with the elderly motel owner, Mr. Grimes. Mr. Grimes, a stout man with silver hair and a gaze that had seen too much, paled when he heard the voicemail. He took a deep breath and explained that years ago, the Grayson did have 9 rooms, but after a series of unexplained occurrences in room 9, they decided to brick it up. Not easily spooked, Sarah pressed for more details. Mr. Grimes hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. Guests in room 9 complained of cold spots, disembodied voices, and shadows moving on their own. Some even woke up with unexplained scratches. One evening, a young woman staying in that room disappeared without a trace. That was the final straw. Mark interjected, "But if it's bricked up, how did we get this voicemail?" The old man's voice trembled. "I don't know. Nobody should be able to call from room 9. I made sure of it." Unable to shake off the voicemail's implications, Sarah and Mark decided to investigate further. They sought out locals who might share more about the mysterious room 9. An old woman, Mrs. Caldwell, remembered staying in room 9 as a young girl. The room felt oppressive, like being underwater. That night she heard soft whispering, as if someone was recounting a tale of sorrow. She ran out and never returned. As dusk approached, Sarah and Mark returned to the motel, their minds heavy with stories. They examined the place where room 9 once stood. Sure enough, between rooms 8 and 10, there was an expanse of bricks mismatched from the rest of the wall. Late into the night, another voicemail arrived, the same terrified voice echoing, "Why haven't you helped me? Time is different here. Each second feels like an eternity. Find a way." Driven by a combination of fear and determination, Sarah suggested they try to communicate with the voice by placing a call to room 9. They waited with bated breath. After a few rings, the call connected, and the same fearful voice responded, "Who is this?" Sarah replied gently, "We want to help you. Tell us what to do." The voice whispered, "Find the old floor plans. They'll show you the way." A visit to the town's archives the next day revealed old blueprints of the Grayson Motel, indicating a small crawl space behind room 9, accessible via a concealed hatch in room 8. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah, Mark, and a hesitant Mr. Grimes entered room 8, searching meticulously. They finally located a trapdoor beneath the carpet. With a collective deep breath, They opened it, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel. Mr. Grimes provided a lantern, and Mark led the way. The passage was tight and winding, and the atmosphere grew colder as they progressed. They finally emerged into a space that bore remnants of its past as Room 9, a rusted bed frame, peeling wallpaper, and a decayed dresser. Most striking was the huge ornate mirror that dominated one wall. It pulsed with an eerie light, and within its depths, the shadowy figure of a woman could be seen. Summoning her courage, Sarah approached the mirror. "We heard your calls. How can we free you?" The woman's voice emanated from the depths of the glass. "This mirror trapped my spirit. Break it, and I can finally find peace." Without hesitation, Mark picked up a rusty chair and held it at the mirror. The glass shattered, releasing a brilliant flash of light. When their vision cleared, the room was just an ordinary, albeit decayed, motel room. The oppressive air had lifted. Returning to the motel, they resealed the tunnel. Mr. Grimes, deeply grateful, offered them free stays for life, an offer they politely declined. The Grayson Motel continued to operate, its history now enriched by the tale of the brave couple who freed the spirit of Room 9. The old bricks remained a silent testament to the room that once was and the mysteries it held.